Alright, so today I'm going to be walking through how to do a phasing animation using Sketchup and Lumion. You can probably use this kind of phasing animation, same techniques I'm going to show you in Lumion with other modeling programs, but I'm going to be using SketchUp. So I guess what a phasing animation is a kind of the animations you guys have probably seen where, the building or pieces of the building will kind of fly in from, off the screen and show, how the building is put together. It can be used to show the structure of a building or the stages in which a building might be constructed. It's also just a really kind of interesting and unique way to show, different aspects of your building and the process of which it kind of was designed. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things you can do with it, and you can really use it to show whatever you want to show. But I'm going to show you kind of the basics of how to set up your model, some of the things you need to do to get it into Lumion, and then how to set that whole animation up in Lumion, and we'll ultimately get to a finished product. Um, so the first thing you're going to need is a SketchUp model, and here's just a basic SketchUp model I have of a project I did over one of the last semesters. It was just a competition project I did on my own. Um, So you want to start out with a model, right, of your building. Let me just get all these layers unhidden here that we need. Alright, so if you are used to modeling in SketchUp, you might already know this, but a really good habit to do in SketchUp is to start making groups of things, start making things components. That way, when you move them around and whatnot, they're all stuck together and they're not just individual kind of polygon shapes that you can just make, by drawing different, objects and then extruding them. Those aren't really solid and sticking together. So the first thing we want to do is go and select, all of the pieces of our model, and you should be doing this kind of as you're designing in SketchUp, but you want to make sure that things are all on their certain layers or groups so that things are attached. For example, here's a furniture group that I've put together, and it has all my furniture on the same layer. And if I want to access that, I can double click into it and it's going to highlight all my furniture. And then we'll have even more groups inside of that, like we'll have this table as a group, each chair is a group, so obviously that's how you can duplicate and move them around and have them in different spots inside your project. And then even more so, you're going to have this table as its own group, and then you have your individual geometry like this tabletop, which I could edit if I wanted to. And if I save that correctly, any changes I make to this individual one will affect all of them, and if you don't want that, there's things you can do. But we don't really need to worry about that right now. What you really want to do is make sure you have things like these chairs and tables grouped together, because that's going to be important when it comes to a phasing animation. Because when we export this model to Lumion, we want to export it as separate groups that are going to fly in from the top of the screen. If you just export this whole building, like if this was all just one thing, then you're only going to have that one piece flying in from the top, so the whole building is going to fly in. It's not really going to show you anything. So you want to make sure you have smart groups. Like, for example, I said all these pieces of furniture that I have throughout this building are on a group, so they'll all fly in together. Um, I have these walls right here. I can delete them just to show you what they are, but I have walls here as a group. Windows and door coverings. The roof is its own group. And if you want to get really specific with things, you can. Like I have this, shaded pergola, whatever you want to call it, in the back here, right? So I have the base layer as a group, and then I have the next layer and the next and the next. They're all individual groups so that this will fly in and then this will, and this will show how this kind of structure is constructed in that way. And that's kind of what you want to think about when you're making these groups. You want to do it in a smart way, like what's going to fly in with what makes sense, what's it showing, and then you got to consider, okay, what order are you going to have that in as well. But Again, we'll get to that, but I'll just go ahead and show you. I'll ungroup all this furniture. Um, you know, you can go explode. That gets rid of your groups, kind of. And so now we are going to have, oh, I might have to do it a couple times because they might be grouped a couple times just throughout my process here, you know. So once you get down to the base layers, so they're kind of ungrouped now. So I have my individual table, chair, and chair. So just for simplicity's sake, let's say, you know, I want this chair, and this table to come fly in at the same time into our phasing animation. Like I want this to be a piece of the phasing animation, right? Then you want to select them all, holding down shift and clicking, then right click and then make a group. Okay, so that's going to attach these pieces together. You know, these ones are still separate because we didn't do it there, but here these guys are a group. And then what you're going to need to do is go ahead and make this a component. And making this a component is important because it lets you name it. Let's just name it table and chairs, okay? And when you make this a component, it kind of becomes its own individual model within the larger model, right? Like now this is something that I can export. If it's not a component, it's not really able to be exported. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and right click again, and you can save this, okay? If you save as, if my computer can catch up here, you'll save as, and then you can save this thing. You're going to go, you know, wherever this file is, or wherever the whole thing is housed, or wherever you want to move it into Lumion, and make it a group. And you can name it table and chairs. And you might even go ahead, if you have an idea of like how you want your phasing animation to come together, you might name it like layer 1 or layer like 6, like depending on what stage in the animation you want this to fly in. So you would save it as a SketchUp.skp, just a basic SketchUp model. You can load that straight into Lumion. But we're not going to do that because I already have all these. I'll just go and show you, but just so you know the process. Another thing you want to keep in mind when loading these kind of models into Lumion is that if you want to have different textures or materials or whatnot, you're going to want to go ahead and assign all of that ahead of time. So everything here is kind of its own texture material. You know, you could make it anything. It doesn't have to be what you want it to be in the final version. It just has to be its own entity, so that when you go ahead into Lumion, you'll click and everything that's that same material property in SketchUp, you can then change in Lumion. So you got to do that. It doesn't matter, like I said, what the material is, if it matches what you want it to look like in the end, but if you want to add material later, you're going to have to do that. Okay, so that's kind of the basics when we're talking about SketchUp. Make sure you get your model. Make sure you group everything. You know, you want to start doing this again, like I said, as you're building, you should be making groups of things. That makes sense. And then you're going to make components out of things that you are going to want to fly in on separate layers. Like I have the walls, the furniture, you know, the window coverings, the roof. It's all separate. So that way when we go ahead and load each one of those into Lumion, they will fly differently. Okay, so that's kind of your process here. You'll export everything you need, and then you'll go into Lumion. So if you're not really familiar with Lumion, it's just a rendering software that lets you kind of edit and do things as you go. In here, it's pretty simple, pretty user-friendly. But what you're going to want to do, first of all, when you load up the program, it won't look like this. You'll probably just have a blank space if you just choose a blank area, which is fine. But I have everything in here already. But what you're going to want to do when you start is you're going to go to this import new model, and then you're going to go ahead and find where you saved everything, and then you're going to import that. So let's just go ahead and find out where I put all this stuff. Okay, so it's in here. So as you can see, I have all these different, you know, files, which is just that exported. So there's ceiling structure, columns, exterior walls. Okay, so I named them so I know what they are. I wrote which layer they are, so how I want them to come in to the model. You don't have to do that, but I mean, I just think it makes it a lot easier in the end when you're doing it all. You can just say, okay, this is layer 3. I just put it on layer 3. But you're going to go ahead and load this all in, so you'll just open it. I'll just show an example. You'll open. Oh, it's not going to want me to do it because there's already in the file, so I'll just change the name. Okay, so now you see all this stuff, and it's already in my model, but you know, if it wasn't, for instance, already there, you'll place it down on the ground, and then you'll just kind of grab it. You can use these move options at the bottom. You know, it's already on the ground plane, so I'll just slide it over, and you just slide it into place kind of where it's supposed to be. You know, it takes a little bit of messing around with, but that's how you do it, and you kind of put your model together piece by piece inside the program as you load it in, okay? Like I said, again, if you want to add different textures to things, you can to your materials. I've already, you know, gone ahead and done that here, but if I wanted to, for say, switch something, I'll just click on my model and see everything that's highlighted is in SketchUp. It's the same texture, so it doesn't have to be in the same group or anything. It just has to be the same texture, the same color. Whatever you choose over here, everything you color this as or use this material on is going to change when you change it in the model, even if it's not, you know, the same group. Okay, and you can obviously go ahead and scroll through all this material if you wanted to. I'm not going to change anything there. I've already done that. I got it how I want it. But you can go ahead and do that when you throw yours in. So once you have all of your pieces in and positioned where you want them, so your model's kind of looking like you want it, how it did in SketchUp, but you got your individual parts, you're then going to go ahead and click down to the movie section down here. You can go to photo. This is how you would normally, you know, render things out inside of the program. But if you want to do a facing animation, it obviously has to be moving. And you'll go, I have the kind of finished product already made here, but we'll go ahead and kind of do it again here, or do a couple steps of it again so you can get an idea of how to do it. You'll go movie from file, or not movie from file, I'm sorry. You'll go to record, and then you're going to get in the space, and again, it's like the building space, except now you're flying around. And what this is kind of doing is you're setting up a path for your camera. So, okay, if I just want to fly around this model kind of, I'll just do this, add keyframe, so it kind of takes a picture, and then you'll go ahead and move your camera. And as you're moving your camera, nothing's going to happen to the original keyframe, and you're not going to get any motion until you do a new keyframe. Okay, and now I've pretty much set a step between these two, and the camera will fly from this one to this one, along, you know, kind of a path that makes sense to get into position. And you can go around and do this. I'm just going to do it quick, but you go around and do it however you want and set it up. And this will show like the length of the clip, so how long it's going to take to, you know, go through that. And you can make it longer if you want. You can make it shorter, longer. It'll just kind of affect the speed that the camera goes through. And then when you want to test, you know, that path, you just hit play. And it's simple. There you go. You got a camera path already set. It's going to follow that. So that's what you're going to be looking at. Then we just have to get to the part where, you know, the building actually flies into the screen. But that's pretty easy to set up a camera path. You can do all sorts of things like go through the building, set it in a stationary spot. I think this orbit's kind of nice. You can see what's going on. So you're going to save that. What you can do as well is you can just go into the effects. I like to make my own effects. There's so many things you can play with in here, but you can also just choose a custom style if you want. You know, these are just going to be presets. You don't have to mess with anything. So we can just choose realistic if we want to. Alright, so then you can see the scene kind of change based on that. You can adjust these how you want to get, you know, the scene you want. If you click on the screen, it'll kind of render for you, so that's kind of like a more accurate view of what it'll look like. Um, so the next thing you're going to do when you want to get the actual animation part, which is what we're talking about, done, you go to the FX again, you add effect, you go to animation, and then you're going to go to animated phasing. So it's super simple. You just click that, you click this little edit button, and there we go. We are starting. So real quick, before you select anything, just some settings here. You can play around with these. I found it works best if you pull the stagger all the way up. If you pull the ease in all the way up, this is going to make things like float down more gently and not just like snap into place. And then you can kind of change how you want the pieces to come into view. So you could do sky drop, come up from the ground, implode, pop in. I did sky drop. I think it looks the best, but you can obviously play around and do different things. The next thing you're going to want to do is actually start selecting these different pieces that you've put into the model. So just click here to select your objects, and you can see these little bubbles pop up, right? So again, this is where naming everything correctly and figuring out the order you want things to go in beforehand comes in handy, because you can see it says like wood to layer 11, so okay, I want to click that 11th. So what you want to do is go down here, hit stagger objects in the order that you select them. So this way, if we just go along and follow our naming convention and we select everything in the correct order, then we don't have to mess around with reordering things later, okay? So, you know, this is 5, this is 6, this is 4, 14, 7, 9. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of different ones. We just got to find one, which I know one is going to be my landscape, and I actually don't want that to be part of the phasing animation. I just want it to be here, you know, when everything starts. So we're not going to select that because we don't want it included. What we are going to select, if we could find it, is the second one. And you know, the second one's actually going to be the columns that support this building, which are inside the walls, so it could be hard to select them, but you can see they're kind of clipping through. So you can also just click directly on something if you want to select it. So I'll just click those columns. So they're going to be the first part that flies in, right? Then, you know, I could click on the second thing, which is these walls. I want the walls to come in, right? And then maybe I want the doors. And then I probably want, you know, let's think the furniture, because we want the furniture to maybe come in before the roof's on the building so that the furniture doesn't fly through the roof. So we'll select that. I'm just going to go through and maybe select things a little out of order here because I just want to show you how it is done. But you know, obviously you can play around with it, and again, naming conventions will make it super easy so that you don't have to rearrange things later. You just hit that stagger in order and then it'll come in that order. So let's see, let's keep selecting some couple things, you know. But again, like I said, this is all able to be edited. We're just going to go ahead and select some things so you can see how it's done when we're finished and how you can edit it. Try to get everything selected. Alright, so I think that's probably close to everything. It might not be everything exactly, but again, it's when you're in here doing it yourself, you can adjust all that. But when you think you have everything and you've done it in the order you want, you hit save. Okay, and so see all this stuff that's here already, like these trees and this plants, that's there in the landscape. That's there because we didn't select it. You know, I missed the bubble. So if you see stuff that's still visible and you want it to fly in, you need to go back into what we were just in and, you know, go ahead and click those bubbles, or they're not going to be part of this animation. But once you do have everything selected, all you have to do is hit this play button down here and see, oh, okay, so everything just kind of flew in, right? If you notice it came in very quickly, that is because our start time and our duration is only 1 second, while our video lasts, you know, 16, 17 seconds. So all you have to do is drag this duration all the way up. Now it's going to take 16 seconds for everything to drop in. Okay? Another thing I like to do is I just move this move distance up higher. It just means that stuff is going to be dropping from off the screen instead of, if I move it down to a small amount, it's going to be dropping from the middle of the screen and you're not going to get the cool effect. So just move that up to, you can obviously play around with these settings to see what works best for you, but I'm going to do that and see, okay, here we have our animation playing. We have our pieces dropping in. It might not be in the order we want, but obviously, like I said, go ahead and play around, see what works best for you. But this kind of shows how, the building's put together in different ways, and it's pretty cool to show. So when you're done, you just hit Save Changes, and then you have your phasing. So you'll back out, and all you got to do is hit play, and your movie that you set up earlier is going to run and your animation's going to play, and that's pretty much it. And yeah, then you just export it out. And if you want to set up multiple different scenes like I'll show you that I have for my final, you can just copy this animated phasing thing by clicking on it, hitting menu and hitting copy settings, and then you can just paste it into another movie edit thing down here. Okay? So I'm just going to remove this because I already have a couple finished ones, and I'll show you kind of what they look like. So in the program it kind of looks like this. This is kind of the clean version of what I just showed you. And again, the orbit view I think just shows a lot of the process of how things are being built, which is kind of what you're trying to show off with your project here. And then you can also go ahead and make another view if you wanted. You could do the same thing I showed you, and this just kind of shows an interior, walkthrough of the building while it's being constructed, which kind of shows a little bit of different things than the exterior orbit view showed. This kind of shows what, what the inside might be like, how the furniture works in the building and all that. So again, play around with it. You can do a bunch of different things. And just see what works best for your project and show what you want to show. Okay, and when you're all done with that and you got everything how you like it, you'll go to render and you'll render your movie. You want to do entire movie if you have multiple frames, and you can adjust your output quality, your frames, and what quality you want. I just will say that doing an animation like this is pretty intensive. When it comes to rendering, you might want to select a couple lower settings depending on the computer you're using, because it's going to take, if you select just the middle settings that it's suggesting for you and you just don't have a good enough computer for it, it could take you, 10 hours to render, so think about that. Think about how much time you have, and play around with it. You can always stop it if it's going to take too long and retry a different setting, but that's pretty much it. So I hope that helped. I hope that explains how you can kind of take a model from Sketchup and throw it into Lumion and use this phasing animation feature. That is all. Thank you guys.